Hi, friends. This is Caroline from Carousel, and welcome. So, today, energy update for you for about the next 5 weeks. So, we're at the end of October 2020, going into November, and I'd like to give an update of kind of what to expect and how to sail through this time through the end of November. I have a few notes, but I'd like to note first that I do a weekly energy update for my Carousel Divine online members. And what came up this week was demonstrating that there may be some challenge this week. And I'm sure everybody is kind of feeling that. We have a full moon on Halloween on Saturday, October 31st, 2020. So it's interesting to have a full moon and so much astrological activity at this period in the year because this is what they call as the veil is very thin. And so, as I mentioned to my members, you're probably seeing shadows out of the corner of your eye, maybe feeling like presences in your home or in your space, having more synchronicities. Maybe you're seeing numbers, or a song is coming on for you, or you think of somebody and then they call you, but more synchronicities and just more confirmation that the other side is there, or the other realms, or the other dimensions, or your loved ones that are past are with you. So, this is really the time of year where the veil is the thinnest, where we are most connected with the other dimensions and the other realms. And part of that is due to the season. So, in the fall, the northern hemisphere, the natural rhythm of going into a period of decay and dormancy as we go from fall into winter opens us up to, let's say, the shadow side, or the side that is hidden. So this is why the veil is thin right now. So the astrological energy would have been getting now probably through like November 30th. To be honest, really until like December 21st, until the winter solstice, or the December solstice, is that there's a lot of stuck energy coming to the surface. So there's a lot of, I'm just taking a look at my notes so I can do this succinctly. There's a lot of shadows and stuck energy that is coming to the forefront right now. So we're being really confronted with the things that we can't carry with us. So let me take it a step back as well. So December 21st may not be an important date to you, but it is a very important date in the sense that it will be let's say it will be when the caterpillar can leave the cocoon. So for the last year, probably since March, the March equinox, we have been in the cocoon period. This is why everything feels like it's dismantling, because it is. So there is no this isn't an end, even though it feels like an end. This is really a rebirth. We have become so afraid of the idea of death and endings that we've lost the real meaning of them, which is rebirth and renewal. So without the fall and winter, the decay and dormancy period, we wouldn't be able to go into the fertile spring, which is the creation period, or into summer, which is the life period where we celebrate living and life and connection and the sun and light. So as we go into the December solstice, that will be the period where the caterpillar is able to come out of the cocoon, so to speak, or where it will start making its way out of the cocoon. So this is important because when a caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it completely liquefies. So it basically feels like it's dying. And I'm sure a lot of you have been feeling that way lately, where it feels like you're just sloughing off. You're a snake shedding skin. You're losing aspects of yourself. And in the time, it may feel scary and it may feel like a negative experience. But in the long term, it is positive. It's usually relationships that no longer serve you. things that maybe you have become emotionally addicted to or dependent on to feel unworthy or abandoned to replicate our wounds, but they don't actually serve you long term. It's not really what you want to keep doing or where you want to keep going. It's just familiar. And so this is what we're being given right now. This is what's coming up with all of the Mercury retrograde ending on, I think it's November 3rd, but then there's like a 1 to 2 week shadow period after that. So really we have about 3 or 4 more weeks of this Mercury aspect, and then Mars goes direct on that same day, I think, or within a couple of days of that, and Mars is about our movement forward. So with all of these retrograded planets and the moon going full on Halloween, All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day, Dia de los Muertos, whatever your preferred term is, the Samhain, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, which would be the pagan version, which all of those holidays are this time of year because of the thinning of the veil. So that is a day to celebrate, to honor those that have passed on. And with the full moon on that day, we can really access those energies. We can really access the ability to create momentum in our own shadow aspects. So we can really utilize the universal energies that are available to us to almost like activate those shadows or stuck energies. So the habits that we've had a difficult time breaking, or the belief systems that have kept us limited, or the stories we tell about ourselves, or the relationships we can't seem to get out of, or whatever. But think about the cycles that limit you, the cycles and habits, patterns, beliefs, and thoughts and deeds that limit your growth. And so as we move into the next week of the full moon on October 31st, it's going to really bring those emotions to the forefront. It's really going to pull up and unearth these uncomfortable things. This is true on the microcosm and on the macrocosm. So all these things I'm talking about, you will be able to see in the microcosm, which is your individual life, and on the macrocosm, which is on a bigger scale. So let's say the political scale, the your company scale, your family scale, whatever. So on a larger scale as well. So we're really being confronted with those shadows of ourself and of the world for us to move beyond December 21st with the 5D New Earth template, basically, for us to move into a new era, which is what we are moving into. We are moving into the golden age, which is 1,000 years of peace. This is all, that's for another video, I guess. So all of these things that are happening are for the better. This is what we are experiencing as a collective, is the unearthing of like festering wounds. So you can think about, and you're experiencing this on the individual scale as well, but if you can think about it as if we've had wounds as a society, as individuals, whatever, we've had wounds that have not been able to heal, that have festered and become infected and have polluted other parts of the body. And so what's happening now is we are identifying those festering wounds. We are seeing them for what they are. And then the next phase will be putting medicine. But right now it's the seeing. We can't heal things that we aren't aware of. We can't heal a wound that we can't find. Or we can't fix a bone that we don't know is broken. And so that's where we are now. We're in the seeing stage, and it's so uncomfortable. And as I've gone back to some of the transmissions that the guidance have gave me, they keep saying that. They keep saying that like 2 or 3 months ago. They're like, there's so much worse coming to the surface. There's so much you didn't know that you're going to see. And like, we're sorry, but it's necessary. So we can't move forward into our ultimate reality carrying these things. And it's the same thing on the individual level. If you're hoping for a healthy relationship, you can't move forward never acknowledging a past betrayal with your partner. It doesn't work that way. You can't ignore it and gloss over it and then all of a sudden it's better. It's like you can't expect your garden to grow what you want it to grow if you don't first take out the weeds and the bad soil. You have to acknowledge those things that need to be addressed and healed and removed and or transmuted, which would be evolved to their highest essence, for you to fertilize and have what you really want. So right now we're in kind of the sloughing period. And I really like the phrase, the expression of, you can't make a snake shed its skin any faster. It does it in its own time. And so I especially if you've been on the path of self-transformation and self-improvement, and you're in the spiritual world, or you're really big into those dynamics. You may feel like you should be somewhere else, like you should be further along, like you shouldn't feel this way, like you shouldn't feel so run down or scared or holding on or in denial or bearing or whatever. And I'd like to point out, you can't make a snake shed its skin any faster than it does. It removes its skin in its own time, so it can grow at its own time. And what the guidance reminds me is you can't hurry, you can't rush divine timing. You can't make a fruit. You can't make a tree create a fruit any faster than it does. It does it in its own divine timing, and it's perfect as it is. Your journey, your growth, your evolution, your ascension, your whatever, isn't supposed to look like anything other than what it looks like. And it is in our resistance to it being the way it is, with the expectation that it should be something else, that is what makes it feel like a tension. That's what it makes it feel like a war, like a struggle. It is in the resistance of allowing it to be where it is and what it is that prolongs the experience and makes it a negative experience, rather than just you're fighting the current, you're fighting the river, instead of just sitting on the inner tube and being like, woo, what a fun ride. Whoa, I didn't know that was there. Whoa, I didn't know that was there. So as we move through the unearthing, which is what's happening now, we are unearthing. I recommend you just flowing with it if you can, and approach these things with the idea of an exploration, an inner explorer. I saw somebody called her account, she's like an inner astronaut. So whatever you'd like to see, or like an inner Indiana Jones, or whatever you want to call yourself, but more of take what you find in the unearthing period as the shadows come to the surface as an exploration of yourself, of like, oh, that's interesting, I didn't know that was there, that connects here, instead of from a place of judgment, because you have to work through that extra layer otherwise. If we approach it with an exploratory mind of like, oh, that's interesting, oh, I didn't know that was there, like, okay, now that I know this, I can see this, or like, oh, I see how this connects all here, blah, blah, blah. Think of it like a puzzle. Instead, if we approach this with a place of judgment of, oh, I shouldn't feel like this, or like, oh, I can't believe I'm this weak, or like, oh, I can't believe this is like this, or whatever you think, whatever that negative voice, that egoic voice is, you have to work through that layer of judgment and still do all that shadow stuff. So you're just adding more work for yourself. So there's nothing wrong or right in the way you feel, or it is what it is. There's a reason why we've created the coping strategies that we have. There's a reason why we respond to situations in the way we do. You have a good reason for it. It just doesn't mean that it's the reason or the habit or the pattern that serves you best now anymore. But at one point in time, it made sense. And so if you can approach the unearthing of the shadows like that, you will sail through this period much more easily. So I'm going to be giving my Carousel Divine Online members like rituals or things that they can do with the full moon on Halloween on October 31st to kind of utilize those energies and things they can do around. So if you're interested in that, please check that out. I'm looking at my notes. And so, so the thinning of the veil. So we also have the opportunity to connect to other realms. You're probably getting a lot of downloads right now too. You're probably getting a lot of insights, and you may even have that thought of, where did that come from? Or how did I know that? So the veil is thin. So it's really a great time if you're interested in cultivating your own intuition, or your connection to a god or a goddess that you like, or your connection to your loved ones that have passed, or whatever, your synchronicities, your own angels and guides, your higher self, your whatever. But anything in the intuitive realm, anything in the energetic and antimatter realms, which would be something that you can't necessarily see with your physical eyes, this is a great time to start cultivating that practice now through like the end of November into like December. So that's a great thing to do too. I'm looking at my notes. Okay. So the next thing is what we're going to see more of as we move into this is the healing and the rising of the feminine. And I don't necessarily mean women, and I definitely do not mean the wounded feminine that is mimicking the masculine. And so what I mean by that is I've heard many women in power positions explain that they feel they have to come off as strong and hard and they can't show emotions. They have to act like a man to be considered worthy of being in that position. So that's what I mean by the wounded feminine mimicking the masculine. That's not what I'm talking about here. That is not the rise of the divine feminine. In fact, that is hindering us, if anything else. That is keeping us limited and small and in an enslavement pattern, an enslavement archetype, which I'm going to go into in about a second. So this healing of the feminine, the rise of the feminine energy is so important because as we are confronted with these shadows, as this stuck energy comes up to be healed, nurturing ourselves, nurturing others, being patient, receiving help, receiving from others is part of the feminine. And so the only way we can move through this in a gentle way without causing more damage to ourselves, basically, is to have that balance of receiving the healing, receiving rest, receiving help, nurturing ourselves, receiving from ourselves, receiving love and forgiveness from ourselves, and balancing it with the masculine act of the action, the doing, the moving forward, the forward action, the giving of the self, the giving to others, etc., etc. And so it is in this balance that we will find healing and the alchemical union, as they call it, where we can access our full vitality. So we've been very wounded masculine energy dominant for like a millennia, for a very long time. And so now what I mean by the rise of the feminine is the rise of the divine feminine, which is the feminine that is not trying to mimic the masculine and is not trying to subverse feminine aspects of ourselves, which is our emotionality. That's another thing too. As you're healing the shadow work, you have to go into the emotions. You have to allow yourself to feel it. It is only through feeling it that we can work with it. And there's that expression, I'm going to say it again, what you resist persists. And it's the same thing here. If you're resisting your emotions, they persist. Rather, if you can let them kind of like ride the wave, let it move through you, you will notice that they pass much quicker. But that is a feminine, the flowing with the emotions, the allowing, rather than the rigidity of the masculine energies. And this is, I don't mean the feminine and the masculine as woman, man. That's not what I mean. That's a limited version of that. We all carry the masculine and the feminine within us, just as we all carry the light and the dark. We have the dichotomies inside of us, and it is finding the way, as the Buddha would say, which is the middle path. And that's where our true healing, and that's where our growth and our optimal being is. So there are lessons, there are benefits, there are pros to both, and they are both great teachers if we are willing to learn those lessons. So to receive healing, to allow ourselves to feel, is the rise of the feminine. We have to be willing to feel the wrongs that have been done to us. And I mean this on all. As I'm doing my project Peace, Planet Peace 40 Days of Peace Gathering Project. It is a tongue twister. You try to say that. But as I'm going through this, one of the things that came up for me before I started was I also am in the process of forgiving humanity. Of forgiving humanity and humans for the pain that I experienced in my individual life, but also what I have seen humans do to other humans. And I'm in the process of forgiving humanity, but I have to feel through those hurts to basically move into a place where I believe that we are capable of receiving the goodness, where we are capable of operating from that good place. And it is only through forgiveness and compassion that we can get there. And so it's not the quote, forgive them for that they know not what they do. And that's exactly the truth. They don't know what they were doing. That's what they've been given. That's what their parents and their lineage and those that came before them gave them. And so they didn't have the tools or the awareness or the strength to change that pattern, but we do now. And so healing and forgiving humanity is a huge part of that, but that requires moving into the feminine, moving into those feminine aspects of feeling those hurts, of feeling what is stuck there, of acknowledging that there is pain, that there is hurt, that things have happened, that shit that shouldn't have happened did, and things that shouldn't have, or things that did happen shouldn't have, or you know what I mean? So it is through feeling those hurts that are within us, instead of shoving them down, that we can access that healing. So once again, back to the wound analogy, where if you have a wound inside of you and you're just pushing it down, burying it, it will begin to fester. It will persist. It will become more infected, and it will spread and bleed into other aspects of your life. So through the feminine energy, through the rise of the feminine within ourselves and as a collective, can we acknowledge those feelings for what they are? And only through acknowledging them do we take away their like destructive power or their scary power, basically. And we can heal them and move on, and then use the masculine aspects to take the action and the forward movement that is needed to continue. And so, as the guidance has explained to me, is when there's an imbalance of dark to light, when there is a block to innovation. And so this includes in ourselves, you have an imbalance of shadow within yourself when you are not innovating and growing with your own personal development and with your emotions. So if you are not allowing yourself to grow through these emotions, you're just stuffing it down, you're in an imbalance of more darkness. So the way they explain it to me is a plant or anything in nature is always growing and adapting. And there's only two reasons it's not doing that. One is because it's healing. So it's diverting the energy it uses to grow and adapt to heal. And two, it's dying. So unless you are using your energy to heal, the ideal, if you are in your natural rhythm with the universe and with everything, is that you're either healing or you're growing and adapting. And if you're doing neither of those things, you're not living. So I want you to keep that in mind as the shadows are coming up, and they're temporary. I promise you, it's so uncomfortable. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but it is uncomfortable, and it's so important because you have two options here. You either settle for the discomfort of less than, or you move into the discomfort of growth, of more, of beyond your expectations, of beyond the limitations that you have ever expected. So you either have the discomfort of the sameness or less, or you have the discomfort of growth and more and beyond, and the unknown, where miracles can come into your life. So that's huge. So the rise of the feminine. And then this is the other thing too, is as we open to receive, looking at my notes here, as we open to receive and to nurture ourselves, we also are ending the slave archetype, as I mentioned. And so the slave archetype, you don't receive. You do not receive healing. It is not about you. It is, you are constantly giving and giving of yourself too much out of obligation and not out of want. And so we are coming to ending the slave archetype in all of the ways. And so one of the biggest ways and the easiest way to explain it right now is being subservient to money. And so this is what we're ending to as we have the rise of the feminine, as we are adjusting these shadows. But that will be what's coming next, is ending the slavery, the subservient to money, to other people, to obligations, and we will be opening up to the idea that wealth and abundance is all around you, and there's so much more than just material wealth or financial wealth. There is wealth in everything, and if we could take our blinders off and take that limitation that's in our mind, that wealth is one thing, we would see that wealth is in everything. If you have friends and family, if you have people around you that care about you, you are wealthy beyond measure. You are more wealthy than multimillionaires that are alone. I promise you that. I'm not saying it's easy to be without financial security. That's not what this is at all. But it's important to acknowledge and show appreciation and gratitude for the various forms of wealth, because there is not just one form of wealth. If you are healthy, You have wealth beyond most people's largest desire, largest dream. If you are healthy, you have so much wealth. If you have connections and good people and a good community, you have so much wealth. If you have food that you can eat, if you have a roof over your head, you have wealth. If you are able to sit outside, if you are able to feel safe, you have wealth. There's so many other types of wealth. If you have an animal that loves you unconditionally and you get to experience that, that is wealth. If you have plants growing in your garden, whether they're herbs or they're flowers or they're fruit, but you enjoy them, you have wealth. There's so much wealth and abundance around you, and it's important to not allow yourself to be blinded, because what will be next is what's coming next in the dark plan, so to speak, is they will be trying to enslave you, to further subservient you to the dollar, so to speak. And the financial system will change. And so they're trying to enslave you. So as it shifts and as it evolves, which is coming in the next 2 to 3 years is what I'm hearing now, that will make you more afraid. So you will be hesitant to step into the new financial system, which will actually be for the benefit of all of us. So right now it's really big about ending the slave archetype. And so this isn't anything. And I mean, not just material wealth, but let's talk about the other ways that we demonstrate the slave archetype. When we do something out of obligation instead of out of desire, that is the slave archetype, that we don't have a say in how we use our energy or our bodies or whatever. So if you are spending time with friends or doing a favor for somebody or doing these things out of obligation, you are operating in that slave inferior superiority dynamic. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to do things not out of obligation. Doing things out of obligation is not the frequency or the vibration you want to be putting into any relationship. Think about, and I've mentioned this in other videos, think about when you receive something from someone and you know they did it out of obligation and they didn't really want to, versus they gave you something because they really wanted to and it's from the kindness of their heart, and etc. Two very different frequencies, two very different dynamics. Still receiving the same thing, the end product is still the same technically, but energetically and the way it feels and the way it shifts the dynamic is very different, and the way it changes and morphs the relationship is very different. So ending that slave archetype within ourselves and within our relationships is huge. So yes, there are certain things that are important and maybe you don't necessarily want to do, or maybe there are things that in the moment you're like, oh, I really don't want to do that, but then it ends up being fun. That's a different thing. What I mean is when you feel obligated to portray yourself as something else, you feel obligated to do something out of guilt or out of shame, though, that's what I mean. So it's important to explore where are we operating in the slave dynamic, the slave archetype. And that is what is ending with the rise of the feminine, because the rise of the feminine, like I mentioned, will be really emphasizing the nurturing, the self-care, the healing, and the receiving. That we are worthy to receive, we are worthy to maintain our boundaries. We don't have to do things out of obligation, that we can, this is the balancing of that masculine feminine where we step into our full sovereignty. So as the feminine rises, the masculine will be able to heal itself, will be able to operate in the sacred masculine instead of the wounded masculine, which is really focused on dominance and aggression, rather than the sacred masculine is focused on protection and honoring and brotherhood, like connection in a different way, balanced leadership, those types of things, instead of the idea of like dominating and aggressive and abusing power. The sacred, both sacred, divine, have a balanced power structure. So as these come back into balance, and as we do that on the individual level, that will demonstrate and manifest in the macro level. So you don't need to change the entire world. It's also out of our reach. But as you shift and heal yourselves, you will see the positive effects around you. So it's not your job to heal the world. It's your job to be yourself and to do the best you can. And as you do that, you will naturally, as a perfectly designed puzzle, fit where you are supposed to fit. You will find yourself where you are supposed to be, and everything will line up effortlessly. So as we move through this, Just find a way to get grounded. If you're not doing Planet Peace, the 40 Days of Peace Gathering Project with me, I have a free 10-day Kundalini and Chakra Awakening series. So you get the meditation sent to you and it's progressive. So I recommend having a meditation or a grounding practice through this next, 5 weeks, because the energy the shadow dynamic is starting to lose its grip. And so there will be desperate moves to attempt to maintain that power. And so what the guidance explained to me is they've been giving me a lot of information lately, but they're restructuring my understanding of everything. And one of those things is that the darkness that has had dominion over the physical 3D world for a very long time is that they are actually the epitome of the slave dynamic. Why? Because for the dark beings, the dark entities, the dark energies, whatever you want to call it, for them to sustain themselves, they are dependent on an outside source, an outside power source. For them, right now, what it is they feed off of our fear, our negativity, our shame, our all of those negative spectrum of emotions. This is why you see the media sources and the entertainment industry really pushing fear-based stories, things to make you afraid, lots of shock and awe, because once you have a elevated emotion like that or a negative emotion, they can siphon it off. And then secondly, you're more programmable. So as soon as you have an elevated emotion, you can look this up. This is like science. As soon as you have an elevated emotion and then you receive a message, it's more likely to embed itself in your subconscious, and then it becomes a belief structure for you. So the reason it's focused on negativity is because that's what they feed off of. And so even though that, like, yes, there is I don't really want to call it a dark elite, but there is a dark structure that has been at the top of the pyramid for a very long time. So yes, even though they're technically at the top of the pyramid, in reality, they're entirely dependent on you, on me, on us feeding into their system. If you don't feed into their system, if you don't give them the food they need, which is the negativity, the fear, the anger, the resentment, the shame, the guilt, the hate, the division, the all of these things, if you don't give them that, you literally are starving them. You're starving that system. And so they are the epitome of the slave archetype. And as the guidance explained to me, yes, they have been running the show for a long time. And of course, it's been structured the way it is, with the emphasis on finding value in things outside of yourself. So like the material culture, the consumerism, finding value and status in material objects and things that are outside of you. Of course, it's been structured that way because they can't give you something they don't have. They are not sovereign beings. They are not connected to the unity of others. They don't generate their own energy. They have to take it from somebody else. And so, of course, that's how our society and our system has been structured, because that's how they operate. They can't give us something more than what they have. And so this is really the cutting ties with the slave archetype is really taking yourself out of that system. And I promise you, it's so much more open. It's so much more free. There's so much more available for you outside of it. The idea that you are limited to one way of living, that's an intentional like implantation, basically. It's an intentional belief system. So if you can't necessarily see beyond the fences or beyond the trees or whatever you want to call it, if you can't see that yet, at least try to be open to the fact that there are other ways to live happily, healthfully, and peacefully. And there's other ways that maybe you haven't seen before that might be better for you. That there's other ways that you may enjoy living that may make your heart sing and may make you filled with light and happy and peace. And just be open to the idea that there's things that may be better suited even if you don't know what they look like. And be open to the fact that the universe and your guidance system and all of the people and the energies and the earth and all of everything that loves you, which is everything around us, is made of love. Just be open to the fact that everything is working in your favor. The alchemist quote of, when you want something, the whole universe conspires to help you have it. This is it. That's what it is. And so taking ourselves out of that slave and fear dynamic will open us up to the limitless possibilities that are truly available to us. And that is the truth. That is what is beyond the system that is currently collapsing. So this is what to expect. This is what we're going through. It's a lot of information, but this is kind of what's happening after December 21st, 2020. The timeline is smoothing out. It's becoming it's a little bit easier to see. I feel some desperate moves at the beginning of the new year, but this will really be the separation of the wheat from the chaff, I think is the expression, or the cream from the crop. Hi, my love. So you'll start really seeing that split of the 3D, 5D dynamic, and it'll become more apparent, and more people will come over to the 5D. The false structure and the false light systems will really start being obvious, too obvious to the point where people can't really keep their eyes closed. It will be almost as if you couldn't tell people were wearing masks before, like not masks, like makeup or whatever. It's like you didn't know a girl was wearing makeup, and then suddenly you see her in a different light and you realize that she is covered in makeup and she looks nothing like what you thought she looked like. That's kind of what we'll be seeing through the end of the year. And then the beginning of next year, people will start understanding. So there's a couple of really powerful full moons. I will be offering the tools, how to use those resources in the Carousel Divine Online memberships. And that's it for now. It's a lot of information. So do with it what you want. Please contact me if you have any questions. Once again, Caroline from Carousel. And I will be with you so soon.